Welcome back to the world of Ikard, where we learn how to think like the College Board,
so you can get a 5.
Today we cover topic 6.3, Indigenous responses to state expansion. This is all the required content you need to know, which we will cover with several examples. Let's start with India, which now includes present-day nations of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh in South Asia, where a massive revolt occurred in 1857 against the British East India Company. The company had operated in India since 1612, but it was in the 18th century that it became a serious political and military power in the region. Through a complicated combination of wars and diplomacy, it steadily expanded to the point where it was the preeminent force in the region. To oversimplify, as the Mughal Empire decreased in power, the company increased. By 1857, the company had a large army, with about 50,000 British soldiers and over 300,000 South Asian troops, which were called sepoys. The sepoys came from diverse regions in the subcontinent and included Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. There were many underlying causes of resentment against British rule. In India, British officers increasingly viewed the sepoys as racial inferiors. Many of the sepoys, and people in India in general, had seen the British rulers as insensitive to their cultural practices, such as caste privileges, rights to inheritance, and religious rituals. And many of the local rulers resented their loss of political power as the company expanded. The major trigger of the revolt was the release of the new Enfield rifle, which was rumored to be greased with both cow and pig fat, making it offensive to both Hindus and Muslims respectively. This caused a majority of the sepoys to mutiny, many of whom openly fought against the British. This rebellion was joined by other actors, including prominent monarchs like Rani Lakshmibai, the Queen of Jhansi, and Kunwar Singh, the King of Jagdishpur, both Hindus. They rallied around Bahadur Shah Jafar, the last Mughal emperor.
So Hindus and Muslims united together to bring back the power of the Mughal Empire?
Many did, yes, but also many Muslims and Hindus remained loyal to the British for various reasons. Remember, India is very complicated. Sikhs also fought on both sides, and for many reasons. Many of the Sikhs who supported the British especially did not want the Mughals to regain power, since they had experienced persecution. You should know that from Unit 3. The immediate result was a British victory. This led to the era of direct rule by the British government, the Raj. It was also the final nail in the coffin for the Mughal Empire, which officially ended that year. The College Board has this as an example of direct resistance, but we can also see it as the beginning of a growing nationalism that would contribute to future anti-colonial movements. It was a case of the diverse people of India uniting against a common enemy, with Rani Lakshmibai and Kunwar Singh becoming national heroes. In 1885, the Indian National Congress was formed, mostly made up of elite Indians who had been educated in Britain, where they were immersed in learning about Enlightenment liberal ideas like popular sovereignty and self-determination. It advocated for more self-rule, and eventually began to demand independence. We can also include this as a rebellion influenced by religious ideas, including the Enfield rifle animal fat scandal, as well as all the other religious grievances we mentioned. So the Indian Rebellion of 1857 can actually apply to most of topic 6.3. We still need to talk about how new states were created on the peripheries of some empires. One of the College Board examples is the new states in the Balkan Peninsula. We already mentioned in 5.2 how these Slavic states resisted Ottoman rule because of their growing sense of nationalism and their desire to create their own nation states like Serbia and Montenegro. So this knowledge is useful for both 5.2 and 6.3.
It's a twofer.
To be clear, this was not a resistance to the new imperialism of industrialized Europeans we saw in 6.2, but a resistance to the more old-fashioned Unit 3 style land-based empires. But it still counts as indigenous resistance to imperial rule. It just happens to be indigenous Europeans resisting their Turkish rulers. A good example of direct resistance to European imperialism would be Samoury Toure, who engaged directly in wars with the French in West Africa, in and around the modern nation of Guinea. As the French expanded deeper into the interior of West Africa, he was forced to move eastward, where he established the Second Wassoulou Empire, in this case explicitly with the goal of resisting French imperialism. He had many significant victories, but was eventually captured in 1898, ending the Wassoulou state. But his resistance was an inspiration to future nationalist leaders in West Africa.
Just like Queen Jhansi inspired future nationalists in India.
Excellent comparison. Now here's another rebellion inspired by religious ideas. The Ghost Dance of 1889 was a religious movement against the expansion of the United States into Native American lands. The relentless westward expansion and manifest destiny we mentioned in the last video had displaced and depopulated countless indigenous American peoples. And by the late 19th century, this was taking place in the Great Plains and Great Basin regions. A major trigger for the movement occurred with the U.S. passing the Dawes Act, which broke up communal lands and forced the Native Americans to assume a capitalist and proprietary relationship with property. The Ghost Dance itself began with the prophet Wovoka from the northern Paiute tribe. The Ghost Dance was believed to bring back spirits of dead ancestors, end the westward expansion of the United States, and help to bring an era of peace and prosperity. The movement quickly spread to many other tribes, notably the Lakota, who in recent years had experienced devastating conflict with the U.S. Army. But the U.S. government considered this movement to be troublesome and mobilized the army to suppress it, resulting in the infamous Wounded Knee Massacre, in which Lakota people were killed, mostly women and children. Let's finish with a College Board example that checks multiple boxes. The Yaa Asantewaa War, also known as the War of the Golden Stool. This is directly related to the British expansion of the Gold Coast colony we mentioned in our last video. The College Board has this as an example of direct resistance, the Asante resisting the British through military force. And the major trigger was a misunderstanding from a British officer about the Golden Stool. The Golden Stool is a sacred object to the Asante, passed down from ruler to ruler for generations, and believed to be inhabited by the spirits of these ancestors. No one is allowed to sit on it, not even the rulers themselves. The stool itself actually has its own throne, but Frederick Mitchell Hodgson, commander of the British forces in the region, demanded that the stool be brought so that he could sit on it. That was pretty dumb. Yes, it was very dumb. Even other British people thought it was dumb. So this can also be seen as a movement inspired by religious ideas. So Yaa Asantewaa, the Queen Mother of the Asante, roused her people to war in the fifth and final Anglo-Ashanti War, which the British eventually won, leading to the submission of Yaa Asantewaa and her son, King Pembe, and the end of the Asante Empire. Most of these resistance movements were ultimately crushed by the industrial military power of the imperialists, but many of them sowed the seeds for nationalist movements that would come to fruition in the 20th century, leading to many successful independence movements around the world. That is one of the major focuses of Unit 8. We'll see you again next time, and keep thinking like the College Board.